By the early 1970s, in Mexico, a new generation of filmmakers had emerged.
Everyone said, I want to make my film, the film that I want to do, the important film, the meaningful film.
What's that? I've never seen anything like them before. It's one more secret. One is identical to the other, just like an image in a mirror. Like you and me. Let's find more secrets.
The Mexican film industry for many years was a very closed industry. Mexico is a very unionized country, and the unions were very closed, and new directors couldn't get in. There was a long waiting list, and so you had people making experimental films, but they mostly were not shown theatrically. In fact, the union often suppressed them and wouldn't allow them to be shown. In the 60s, you have a new generation, what they call the new wave of directors, who were young people. Film school had just opened, and this was the first group of directors who had graduated from film school.
Juan López Moctezuma, a theatre producer and radio broadcaster, was the only member of this new wave who had an interest in horror. He saw in the genre an opportunity to express radical and subversive views.
Juan López Moctezuma was a very talented culture man that had a very important program, radio program for about 20, 25 years called Jazz in Mexican Culture.
Through his theatre work, López Moctezuma had come into contact with avant-garde artists like Jodorowsky.
Moctezuma was actually an associate of Jodorowsky. He was involved in theater and things like that.
Jodorowsky and Fernando Arrabal, they created something called the Panic Theater.
The aim of Panic Theatre was to create a whirlpool of emotion, to confront an audience with images that would break down the rigid structure of their perceptions. With Moctezuma producing and Jodorowsky directing, this principle was brought to the screen in the films Fando and Lis and El Topo. In 1971, Moctezuma applied the lessons he had learned with Jodorowsky to his own directorial debut. Loosely based on a story by Edgar Allan Poe, the film was called The Mansion of Madness.
Your Majesty, how did you build up this abode, a foretaste of your future empire?
It was very easy. One day, the patients, inspired by me, rebelled. They locked up their torturers. And from that day on, the former patients of this institution became the missionaries of my system, who will depart to preach my gospel.
At times, it even reminds you of El Topo, and because it has this array of bizarre circumstances, odd characters, some of them physically deformed, some of them just mentally, emotionally disturbed. In the United States, it was billed as a horror movie to frighten and shock people, and really it is almost a black comedy. It has very bizarre things going on. López Moctezuma also, at least in Mansión de la Locura, certainly has a sense of humor, and he has many eccentric characters that do odd things.
You are mad.
Whether temporarily or for good is a matter to be decided afterwards. Watch them closely, LeBlanc. See that fellow over there? He pretends to be fishing for something. Don't ask me what. He is the essence of the impossible. She, the hopelessness of the unredeemable.
And he was completely in love with the vampire films. He came to them from a different point of view altogether. He wanted to do a revision of the theme.
Stop it, I say! Stop it!
Dr. Oshik, how dare you interrupt our holy ritual?
Holy ritual? This is the most shameful thing I've ever been a witness to.
It's interesting because while Mexico is a predominantly Catholic country, the government, especially since the revolution, has made an extreme point of separating church and state to a certain degree, even what you would call sort of persecution, let's say, or certainly not giving the church a break. I think that in intellectual circles that there is a definite anti-clericalism. I mean, if you look at Buñuel's films, he has certain aspects of that, and certainly El Topo has its aspects. And in Alucarda, you have an order of nuns who don't wear what I would call normal nuns' habits. They look sort of like mummies or like their corpses being bound up, and then you have the bald priest played by David Silva, who is also in El Topo, so there's a connection there. And as it turns out, he seems like a fanatic at the beginning, but it turns out he was right about the demon possessing Alucarda.
You're the only one here who has the answer.
These are the doings of the transgressor, the seducer, the enemy of virtue, the perpetual persecutor of innocence, the arch enemy of Almighty God.
You mean the devil?
So maybe he was telling the truth after all. But yeah, the whole concept of this convent, where it's also an orphanage where these people go, is far enough removed from the trappings of the actual Catholic Church so that you couldn't be accused of directly portraying nuns and priests as being crazy, but at the same time, there is an anti-clericalism that's quite obvious.
Where I studied at the university in Paris, they taught me that religion was a farce and a form of slavery, that the time had come to break the chains of superstition, the yoke of lies and falsehood. I'm a man of reason, and now I'm faced with something supernatural, which frightens me.
More than Mansión de la Locura, which is sort of a bizarre farce, but Alucarda is much more of it gives you an uneasy feeling. It has a lot of atmosphere.
The things she said were so horrible.
We thought that a confession would restore Alucarda spiritually.
You did not hear what she said. It was evil. It was as if the devil himself was speaking through her. What Alucarda did and said, the girl's state of grace could have been changed by nobody else, only by the devil.
The devil! The devil!
These films were made with professional actors and technicians, but they were made outside of the industry mainstream. They were independently financed. He could make these movies the way he wanted to make them.
You shall blend into each other.
Then, lend into me. Depart then, seducer, enemy of virtue.
The fact that he wasn't under the sort of journeyman pressure to work as a director for hire makes his movies very personal and idiosyncratic. They have a very distinctive mise en scène. Alucarda has an almost organic set design. It looks like it's not a building that was built, it looks like it was a building that grew and developed.
I mean, the government in those years, this is the 70s, early 70s, gave you money if you wanted to make a socially committed film. So if one came with a project such as Alucarda, it didn't fit. I mean, it didn't fit because it wasn't the socially prestigious project. It was not the box office success. It was in the middle.
Rubbish.
Moctezuma's avant-garde movies were not big hits. By the end of the 1970s, the government had nationalized much of the film industry, and horror and fantasy were not high on their agenda.
López Moctezuma made To Kill a Stranger in the early 80s, which was a commercially aimed sort of film. It starred singer Angelica Maria and Donald Pleasance, shot in English once again. Then he had an aborted film that was apparently never released called Bienvenido Maria.
The last time I talked to him was when I came to the Mexican Film Institute. He was the Institute's representative in Los Angeles, California, and he used to take care of the distribution outlet that the Mexican Institute had in Los Angeles. And he was there disillusioned, in fact wanted to go back to Mexico, probably to raise monies to make another film. And I'm afraid he died about 3 or 4 months after that.
Yes, the tree. The baobab tree. And the leaves of the yay and the nay. And the roots. Can this be the end of Meillan?